Happy Sabbath. This is a nerve-wracking day for me. Our testimony is about us. You know, it's about what we went through. So we all have a different testimony. You know, when 1 Peter 3:15 says, always be ready to give an account of what Christ has done for you, what he has done in your life. And if we can't do that, see, I can argue with somebody about the Bible, and I'm never going to win. I can tell them about pastor's testimony. I can tell them about somebody else's testimony. But it's not my testimony. My testimony is the only thing that's going to get to those people that I'm talking to. Let's bow our heads. Father in heaven, we thank you for this day. And Lord, be with me today and guide me. And may the Holy Spirit be with us and reach out to somebody today. In Jesus' name, amen. So I grew up an Adventist. I had no excuses, right? From early on in the mid-1800s when the Seventh Adventist started, the Census Bureau in America, you had to list what church you went to. And my ancestors said Seventh Adventist. We were part of this original Seventh Adventist. My Helen Craig, my great aunt, my grandmother's sister, was the Sabbath school director. She was assistant Sabbath school director for the General Conference. She's the reason you have the Little Friend and books like that. That's where they came from, her inspiration. And if I can get this. Let's see. So, my uncle is founder and director of Project Patch, and he was inspirational in my life the whole time. When I was a little kid, I think I may have talked a little bit. He called me Squawker, and I called him Angel. So I didn't have excuses. I was a Seventh Adventist, right? My dad and my mom, my extended family, this Uncle Tom baptizing me. I was 11 years old, and I studied the Bible. I read the Bible. You know, the thing in the classrooms downstairs, you know, they always had competitions, and I'm very competitive. And so when they said who can read the most, I read the most. You know, and so I did very well. This is my brother and sister, all three of us. That was cold today. Or that day, we were actually down by, is it Sandy? Where were we, Craig? Down there, Grants Pass area, and it was snow, it was ice water, but then I was a good Adventist, right? But I wasn't a Christian. I wasn't converted. You know, and there's a difference between being converted and being a Christian and being an Adventist. We can go to church. That doesn't mean we're an Adventist or a Christian. That doesn't mean we're converted. So, when I was 17, I can remember I was walking. I was just starting my junior year in high school, and I'd gone to Rio Lindo Adventist Academy my freshman sophomore year. But I was gonna go into the high school in John Day at Grant Union. And I was behind True Value, and my mother comes up to me and says, John, we know you want to play football. And if you want to play football, it's your decision. So later that day, I started playing football. That was my first step away from the church. And it wasn't a slow step, it was a run. It's my the top picture is my senior year in high school, our senior football players. And so I started playing football. What day is football on? Anybody know? It's on Friday night or Sabbath, right? Every time. So then I played every sport. I wrestled. I played basketball. I ran track. What day are those on, you think? Every tournament is on Sabbath. Every time. So how long did I go to church? I was done. Train up a child in the way you should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. I had never dreamed my parents would let me play football. And my dad wasn't on board with it, but my mom she thought it was my decision. It is us as parents, it's our decision until our kids are out of our home to have our kids do what is best for them in our mind. So I left the church, joined the Coast Guard. Actually, I played college football at Walla Walla Community, and then I joined the Coast Guard. And anybody who's been in the military knows the first thing you learn when you go to the military. You learn how to drink. The bars, the parties, that's a military lifestyle. Started being competitive. You don't play the sports as much out of high school, so you start doing other stuff, hunting and fishing. Then this is my dad, and in 1990, I wasn't even coming close to being religious. In 1990, my dad died. He was killed in a logging accident. It was tough. I was pretty close to my dad. I was 24, just almost turning 25. And here the man I looked up to was no longer there. But I knew that if I wanted to see my dad again, I had to go back to church. And I wanted to see him. But let me back up a little bit. So in 1990, my dad, he was killed April 19th, 1990. In May 25th, I was cutting old growth out of Coos Bay and had a tree land on my leg. I was airlifed out, and I had what's called closed compartment syndrome. What happened was the compression of the log hit my leg so hard but it didn't come through the skin, which it would have been better if it had, because it's kind of like hitting your thumb with a hammer, how it starts swelling up. My leg started swelling and swelling and swelling. We went to Dr. McCloskey in Bend, and God is looking out for us regardless if we're following him or not, correct? God is not just God of the just, he's God of those that are looking for him also, or those. So we went to Dr. McCloskey in Bend. This is about day 4 after my break, and my leg was blue, black, purple, greens, just all kinds of colors. It was swollen up. My calf was bigger than my thigh. And Dr. McCloskey said, we're going to have to split your leg open. I was 25 and bulletproof. So I had no insurance. He said, you're going to be in the hospital for 6 months. And I said, Doc, I can't do that. I have no insurance. He said, I'll make a deal with you. He said, you come back tomorrow morning and I'm going to put you in the hospital and we're going to do surgery on your leg. He said, now closed compartment syndrome, they just slit your leg open and everything falls out. And then when it heals and all the pressure goes down, then they start skin grafts and put everything back together. So I made that deal with him. Okay, I'll come back tomorrow and in the morning. And he said, it's not going to change. He said, you're going in the hospital tomorrow morning. He goes, this is as bad as leg as I've ever seen. So I was with my mom's one that took me over. My mom we got into the hotel, And my mom's sitting going to be in the bed next to me, and I'm laying in, and I hadn't slept in a couple of days. The pain was so bad. And about 2 o'clock that night, I fell asleep. But that whole time, my mom was praying on her knees. The next morning, I'd actually slept that night for a while. The next morning, we went back, and the pressure was down. Pressure was gone. It wasn't completely gone, but it was out of danger. But I was so far from God that I didn't realize what he had done for me. But my mom did. She knew. So I decided the only way I could see my dad again is go to heaven. And so I wanted to go to heaven because I wanted to see my dad. That's not a good reason. I mean, it's a good start. But Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. Nor is there salvation in any other, for there is no other name under God or under heaven given among men by which we must be saved. It's through Jesus Christ. For there is one mediator and there is one God and one mediator between God and man. And the man, Christ Jesus, who gave himself to ransom for all, to be testified in true due time. It is Jesus Christ that we have to look for. The problem is, I was going to church for the wrong reason. But I started studying. And I started looking, and I tried to get a youth group going, young adult. I tried to do Bible studies. And I said, guys, let's get together. Let's have prayer meeting. Let's do something. Nobody did it. In our church was dead. There was nobody there that really cared anything about the church service and potluck. And so and then I started seeing guys that were going to church. They're playing on softball on Friday night tournaments, on Saturday tournaments. So I was letting others dictate my salvation instead of doing it my own. Instead of looking to Christ on my own, I was letting those around me dictate my salvation. Whoever has no rule over his own spirit is like a city broken down without walls. Therefore, my beloved, as you have always obeyed, not in my presence only, but how much more in my absence, work out your own salvation with fear and trembling. So, because I didn't have my faith founded on Christ, because it was I wanted to see my dad, and I was looking at those in the church to dictate my salvation, I left the church again, and it wasn't. And so I started. I had started a timber falling business in 1989, and was running that, and then so I was building a business, and of course I'm competitive. My goal wasn't to have a business and make money and just be like everybody else. I wanted to be the biggest. I wanted to have the biggest company. I wanted to cut more timber than anybody else. I wanted the biggest timber. I wanted that. So that's what I was looking for, was my glory. What can I get? How I wanted to be on the boards. I was on Associated Oregon Loggers Board. I was on other boards, and I wanted to be the man that people looked up to. For it is God who works in you both to will and to do of his good pleasure. So I went back to the world, and I was back to hunting and fishing, playing sports, and doing whatever was pleasure to me. And the thing about when you do stuff that's pleasure to you, I was coaching wrestling and football. It's short-lived. if you're not in the moment, the time between, like we had Duck football games. We had season tickets to the Ducks. And that was, I don't know if anybody's been at a college football game, the stadium can shake. 60,000 people screaming. It can be exciting. But what happens when that ends after that 3 hours? Especially if your team lost. What do you do for the next week? You hope they win next week, right? But you don't have, how do you sustain that week? You talk about the bad calls the ref made, so your team won or lost. So you end up in a cycle. You can be depressed for a while. You can be on an emotional high. We cut some of the biggest timber around. Our company was doing good. We were growing. We were getting bigger and bigger. I wasn't a bad guy. I didn't drink anymore. I quit drinking. I didn't smoke. I was fairly fair and honest in business. I coached kids programs. I donated money to the Union Gospel Mission. I gave money to the Camps for the Blind every day, every month. Marion County Food Share. I gave money away. I donated. I was a good person. I donated to Project Pack, my uncles. I gave them 2 pickups, furnished their office. But doing good works, does that make you a good person? Does that mean you a Christian? It doesn't. Because I didn't choose God by default, I was chosen Satan. But, so do not lay up for yourselves treasure on earth, where moth and rust destroy, and where thieves break in and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasure in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. But God said to him, fool, and this is where I think of myself, fool, this night your soul will be required of you. Then whose will all these things be which you have provided? So it is he who lays up treasure for himself and is not rich towards God. I was building this company. We had bought machines. These machines cut trees down. Here's a picture of them cutting. Those trees are about 150 feet tall, about 26 inches diameter. And the machines cut trees, and so we were getting bigger and bigger. We were cutting, at days we were cutting over 1 million foot of timber a day. But in order for me to get bigger, what has to happen? There's only so much timber being cut. So in order for me to get bigger, somebody has to get smaller. Correct? I didn't care. I'm back. What shall it profit? What Mark 8:36? What shall it profit a man if he shall gain the whole world and lose his own soul? So Don Newman had a company, and he was having some personal issues. He was having troubles with his wife, and so I decided that's a good time to, instead of console him. I'd met him a few times. I didn't know him personally, but he was one of my competition. So when he started having problems, instead of going and saying, how are you doing? How can I help you? I decided that was a good time to go after all his business. And that's what I did. I'd taken about half of his business, and the last business he had, I'd made a deal with the logger to start doing all their cutting and take it away from Don. That was on a Monday. On a Thursday, I met with the logger and the Forest Service to start one of his jobs. When I got there, I was told that the night before, Don Newman committed suicide. When we look for ourselves only, where are we at? You know, what shall it profit a man if he shall gain the whole world and lose his own soul? My son came to me. I think he was in second grade, and he'd heard about God at school. And he comes home and he asks me who God is. Who's this Jesus? And I had the bedtime stories books. I had all the stuff that my mother had given me, hoping that I would read it with him. I changed the subject. I didn't want to talk about God. And then I can remember I was driving down the freeway. This in early 1992. Or excuse me, not 1992, 2002. And I'm thinking how great I am at building business up. You know, I was one of the biggest companies there was around. How great are we, you know? And you start thinking of yourself, and then and the thought came, how horrible I was at building a family. 6 months later, we were divorced. And we know that all things work together for good to those who love God, to those who are called according to his purpose. So, I got divorced from my ex-wife, Susie, and things just kept going. That was a relief almost. The business got doing better and better. And 2.5 years later, I met Leah, my wife. And 6 months later, we were married. And again, for we know that all things work together for good to those who love God, to those who are called according to his purpose. That was October of 2005. 28 August 2008, 9 o'clock in the morning. I was driving a Feller Buncher, one of these machines. I was driving and that machine weighs 77,000 pounds. Actually, fairly small for a piece of logging equipment. I was driving across a bridge, and the bridge had been built, I think it was 7 years earlier. And the bridge it's on the edge of Sand Lake. They hadn't put a foundation under it. They just put a couple logs, expecting to go over it that same year. But 7 years later, the logs had deteriorated, and the bridge tipped and collapsed while I was driving across it. The machine landed upside down in the creek. I was unconscious for about an hour or a little more. When I came to, I was finally able to get out of the machine, walked back to my pickup, and drove home. Went to the doctors. I shrunk 2 inches in that accident. That's how hard I hit. I broke every rib on the left side of my body. Had quite a few other injuries, but those were pretty minor. I had a traumatic brain injury. I was having constant headaches. I couldn't do the simplest things. I'd never failed at anything in my life. I started failing at everything. Everything I did from that point on, just it was hard to do. So I had the constant headaches. So I had an MRI right after the accident, and then 2 years later we had an MRI that showed deterioration in the frontal lobe. Now, if women that have migraines, over 20, 30 years, will start showing the deterioration of the frontal lobe caused by the migraine headaches. I had it in 2 years. I was having seizures. Lucky for me, they're absent seizures. So I just space out for a little bit. Not very good when you're driving. Other than that, it's pretty good. So I look back at how come God saved me. For he shall give his angels charge over thee to keep thee in all your ways. There's been several other logging accidents similar to mine where bridges have collapsed and stuff like that. I'm the only one that's alive. All the rest are fatal. Why did he save me? For he shall give his angels charge over thee to keep thee in all thy ways. In their hands they shall bear you up, lest you dash your foot against a stone. So we ended up filing a lawsuit against Hampton, who owned the bridge, who had put the bridge in. But I guess let me back up a little bit. So you lose everything. In 2008, in the accident, I had $300 a month payment on my insurance and $500 deductible, and it covered everything. We did good, but by 2010, the insurance had changed. Obamacare had started in, and we had $1,500 deductible and $1,500 payments, monthly payments, and $15,000 deductible. All of a sudden, none of my doctors were covered. You know, when you start having accidents, you have a lot of doctors. We joked a lot about for a time, if it wasn't for the doctors and the attorneys, we'd have no friends. That was our social life, going to doctors. I lost the business. I could no longer do it. We lost, in the timber industry is pretty close knit, and because of this accident, all of a sudden, I'd cut timber for Hampton for 17 years straight. I was their biggest contractor, and all of a sudden, I never got another job. So we lose the business, and we weren't able to pay the mortgage after a while. My wife was taking all her savings and giving it to the doctors. I mean, I had one test at OHSU was over $60,000. My rehab was more than that, and that was all out of pocket. But depression. Pain becomes depression, but depression makes pain feel worse, which makes depression worse, which makes pain worse. So you just start hurting, and you start feeling sorry for yourself. One day I was in my office and had a gun in my hand, sitting in the office chair. I knew that how desperate our situation was financially, but I had a $2 million, I think it was actually a $1.5 million insurance policy. And I had that long, and it didn't matter if I committed suicide or not. And I was sitting in there. The pain that I was going through was so tough. But I started thinking about my dad. And then right then, I heard the door, and my wife came in. I put the gun away before she could see it. That was a close one, really close. Hebrews 5 or 13:5, I will never leave you nor forsake you. So we hired some attorneys. The first attorney I had worked for the insurance company that we were suing. And believe it or not, that happens. It's not. And then Oregon is the largest lumber producer in America. Hampton is the largest lumber producer in Oregon. So our judge suddenly retires. Our judge was doing everything, going against it, and was ruling everything for us. Suddenly our judge retires, and we get a new judge is appointed. The first Republican appointed to a judgeship in Oregon in 37 years. He happened to be the chairman of the Republican Party. He had been the treasurer of the Republican Party. Hampton is owned by three siblings. Dave Hampton is the main one that runs it. Dave Hampton and Judge Day went to Catlin Gable grade school, middle school, and high school. They played on the same soccer team. Why was Vance Day appointed our judge as a Republican in a Democrat state? Vance Day had received over $500,000 from Dave Hampton. Now, Catlin Gable grade school, it costs more to go to kindergarten at Catlin Gable than it does to go to the University of Oregon. It is an exclusive school up in Portland. So, as things started getting worse in the logging case, finally started getting some help. I was to the point where I couldn't hardly speak. The brain injury, I had a neurologist that didn't believe in rehab, a neurologist that didn't say, oh, you take drugs. I was on Dilantin for seizures, so that was fairly controlled. But he didn't believe in any therapy, any help. John, it's a tough gig, but that's where you're at. You're not going to get better. Luckily, with the attorney, we actually ended up switching attorneys to Don Bauermeister and Dr. Aaron DeShaw. Now, it's interesting when you have a doctor as an attorney. He was a doctor and then became an attorney later. Don Bauermeister was the attorney for Exxon Valdez, for Exxon during the Exxon Valdez. He's a high-profile attorney and very good. So he took care of part of it, and then Dr. Aaron DeShaw did all the medical. Well, since we got Dr. Aaron DeShaw, I started getting help. Now, the reason he became an attorney was because he had a head injury. And he saw how hard it was for people with head injuries to get any actual help. And so he became an attorney to help people. They sued and won over $1 billion from the insurance companies for this. So I started getting help through OHSU. OHSU had, I was doing rehab and doing, I had an occupational therapist, a physical therapist, and another one. I can't remember what it's called. And I worked with them for a little while, and they said, you know what, we can't help you. I had a seizure in front of one of them. And they said, we can't help you, but we know somebody that can. And we had a doctor named Dr. Bruce Wierzchowski. So most people call him Dr. Bruce. But Dr. Wierzchowski, he is an eye doctor that just specializes in head injuries. And so I went there and I found out that both my retinas have been torn. Some of the problems I'd been having was my eyes aren't communicating with each other. The nerves in your eyes are in the back of your head, not in the front. So when they go to when the nerves wasn't connecting, so he gave me special glasses, and then I went to PRA, which is Progressive Rehab Associates in Cedar Hills. They have a brain injury rehab program. It's called BRIC. So I went there. And the thing about going to some place like this, I walked into Dr. Wierzchowski's office, and I'm looking at the other people, and I'm like, I got it pretty good. I see the people in the brain injury program. One of the gentlemen had fallen 30 feet and landed on his head off of scaffolding in concrete. He didn't remember his son, that he even had a son. The other thing that's interesting when you go to a place like that is you understand or you see that people understand what you're going through, because you think you're going through it yourself, and you don't understand that. I mean, other people don't get you, and you go there. For instance, I always wore a hat and sunglasses because at the time my eyes, the sun hurt my head so bad. You go into Prague, they don't have any lights on. They understand. A lot of the rooms are dark, and the doctor may have a little light on his desk, but he has a room dark for you. But as bad as I got, I started to see how others were worse than I was. And I started to recover through these programs. I went to Prague for, I think it was 3 months, 5 days a week, 40 hours a week. And that's when I got my speech back. Everything started getting better. My doctor said, if it wasn't for my wife, though, I'd be dead today. It's because of her that I'm still alive. And remember, I said that all things work together for good of them that love the Lord. Well, the thing is my ex-wife married another gentleman shortly after we got divorced. He got cancer. She divorced him immediately. All things work together for them that love the Lord. Because if I had been married to her when I had my accident and went through what I went through, she wouldn't. There's no way she would have stayed. But my wife stayed, and she spent every dime we had and some that we didn't have to get me treatment, to get me help. So things, every time you think, you're on this high, and you think rock bottom's here, you ain't seen nothing yet. Here's not rock bottom. It's way down there somewhere. And when it started getting in, we started with a new judge. Nothing was going right. And our attorneys told us, John, do not look at the jury, because it's not their fault. No matter what happens, it's not their fault. So they sent me I was sent down to San Diego. And an MEG is a MRI on steroids. It's like 10 times what an MRI can see. This is the patient history. 49-year-old right-hand male who had traumatic brain injury in an accident on August 28th, 2008. He has headaches, dizziness, blurred vision, seizures, problems with concentrating and spacing out, episodes, difficulty with calculations, and short-term memory and spells. That was just a short list. This is actually my brain on the MEG. The red part of the brain is where it's injured, slowing, and damaged. It wasn't just in one spot. We were surprised how throughout the brain it was. We knew it was the frontal lobe where I hit, but it was the whole brain. So I start getting back. There was one day I finally decided I'm going to go to church this week. And I hadn't gone to church for over 30 years. And I called Uncle Tom. I said, Uncle Tom, where should I go to church? He said, well, there's a church in Salem. And so I actually went here one day, the first day. And unfortunately, I shouldn't say unfortunately, my wife came with me, but unfortunately, as being a Catholic, somebody had at the church had made some bad comments to her about Catholics. And she said, I'll go to church with you, but not there. So I call him back up, and I said, Uncle Tom, told him what happened. I said, he goes, well, there's a good church in McMinnville. So we started going to McMinnville. But before that Friday night, I'd gone to church on Sabbath. The Friday night, we were going up to our daughter's place in Beaverton. We were going to go out and have pizza with her. It was July 18th of 2014. At approximately 4:10 p.m., Sergeant Randy Whitaker was tragically killed in a motor vehicle accident, crash on Highway 22 in West Salem. That was right in front of us. I got out. I cut the top off his Jeep. He was driving a Jeep with and the thing was is Randy Whitaker had actually met him a few times. He was a sergeant, and he's a big guy. He's about 6'6", 250 or more, probably bigger than that. And his head came out the top of his Jeep and hit the barrier, and he was dead instantly. But I didn't know that. I cut the top off his Jeep, and all his blood was out of his body. He was gone. There was nothing. There wasn't even blood dripping. It bled out so fast. And I'm standing in that pool of blood, and I'm thinking, Jesus came for him that moment. Not that Jesus came back, not that he's going to heaven or hell that minute. But for all intents and purposes, what he did that day is the end of his time on earth. His probation is over. And the thing about Randy Whitaker was that he passed us right before he had the accident. And he was driving how I normally drive. And he was my same age. And I got to thinking about that. You know, as I left that accident scene that day, I decided I'm not going to let others this time dictate my salvation. It's between me and God. It's not between me and Pastor. Pastor can guide us, but it's between me and God. It's our relationship that we have with God that makes the difference. So I started studying the Bible. I went to church the next day. I started studying the Bible. I will never leave you nor forsake you. So that time on, you know, there's a passage from Ellen White. It said, God deserves man to exercise his reasoning powers, and the study of the Bible will strengthen and elevate the mind as no other study can. When I started studying the Bible, my mind got better and better. There's no amount of therapy that helped that more than reading the Bible. Because I didn't just read the Bible, I studied the Bible. I studied, so that is what helps us the most, our relationship with Jesus Christ. And he can heal us more than anything else. Let me see if I can, there's where. And then they cried out to the Lord in their trouble, and he saved them out of their distresses. He sent his word and healed them and delivered them for their destructions. Oh, that men would give thanks to the Lord for his goodness, for his wonderful works to the children of men. Oh, Lord, my God, I cried out to you, and you healed me. It is God in us that makes the difference. It is not what we do of our own. Now, we ended up losing our place. We lost our farm. And it's getting late, so I'm going to try to hurry this last little bit. Sorry. But we lost everything we had. We had garage sales. Now, I had enough equipment and stuff. I had a garage sale, and with that garage sale, I was able to buy a house, a small manufactured home. It was a big garage sale. But I hated to leave that farm. We had, and there's a couple other pictures. This is our farm. We had a bunch of cattle. We had ponds. We had Christmas trees. We were leasing probably, so we owned a couple hundred acres and leased a couple more. But then we lost the logging case, and we knew it was coming up because of what was going on. But I finally figured out that if I'd have won that logging case and got millions and millions of dollars, what's the chances I was here today? Right? For we know that all things work together for good to those who love God, to those who are called according to his purpose. A week after the logging case, we had just moved to Kaiser. We had left the farm. We had moved to Kaiser. The logging case, a week later, after the logging case, I was digging up a rose bush in the garden. I was sweating pretty bad, and all of a sudden I had an instant headache, really bad. And I walk in the house. My wife was in the shower, and I asked her where the blood pressure cuff was. She knew that something wasn't right. So she told me to go sit down. I sat down. I didn't know what was going on, but then I had a little indigestion. And she got on the phone with her doctor, and then my jaw started hurting. As soon as my jaw started hurting, I knew it was a heart attack. I had 100% closure of the right side of the heart. The heart stopped. The right side started spasming. The EMTs got there, and they knew it was serious. The EMTs, normally you have one driving, you have guys in the back. The chief told them, get in the back, all of you. They didn't expect me to make it to the hospital. Well, I get to the hospital, and then a few, and I made it okay to the hospital. I get there, and the doctor comes in and says, this is fine. We do these procedures all the time. And as he walks out, the nurse comes over and has me sign stuff in case I die. It wasn't quite as reassuring as the doctor was. But 3 hours later, when I get out of OR, it only took a couple minutes for me, but my wife was having a tough time. But the doctor tells her, if you were still living on the farm, or because she told him that we'd just moved, he goes, he never would have made it. There's no way. We were a mile from the ambulance, and we were in OR within 29 minutes of starting the heart attack. And I think and we know that all things work together for good that love the Lord. Why did I lose the farm? I didn't want to lose the farm. I loved it. I loved our horses, the cattle, and everything we had. And people tell me, well, God could have made it so you didn't have a heart attack. But we have our own choice. It was the choices that I made, eating the half pound of bacon on my burger and eating how I did, that caused me to have the heart attack. God put me in a place where I could survive that heart attack. It's all we know that all things work together for good to them that love the Lord. We are called according to his purposes. So it is amazing what God has done for me, and everything that we look at in our lives, we can look towards God. I've had in the last 9 years, I've had 11 surgeries. I've had 2 heart attacks and 1 stroke. It's because of what God has done that has got me through those things. And I'm healthier or better now than I have been in a long time. Looking back over what God has done over my life, I can see a lot of times I was driving a Porsche doing 85 miles an hour, woke up in the ditch. between Bend and between John Day and Baker City, there's only one spot you could do that and survive, and that's where it was. I fell asleep. Healing my leg, every little thing. I lost my glasses. When I first started coming back to church, I lost my glasses. I was cutting a bunch of brush, and I get down on my knees after a while, and I pray because I'd looked everywhere. And I knew Leah wasn't going to be happy with me because I just lost a $500 pair of prescription glasses. And they were green. And I just cutting all this brush. I get down on my knees, and I pray. I stand up, and I did not take one step before I found my glasses. What does God care for us? God doesn't care the greatest things only. God, the little things in our lives. I was going to give my testimony at Hopewell, which is a little easier because there's 5 people. But I was going to give my testimony, and that morning I woke up with a sore throat. And I said, God, if you want to give my testimony, you have to heal my throat. Before I was done praying, my throat was good. God does stuff for us every day. It's the relationship that we have with Him that we have to keep walking in God. And it's a day-to-day thing. And I pray that every one of you here wants to join me in Christ's soon coming. Because I believe it is very, very soon. Please, everybody, just think about your own testimony. We all have a testimony for God. And it is to whose glory that we give our testimony? It is to God's glory. It is to God only. Thank you.